Today on Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond.
By the way, if you think you're going to go into business, I should have taken the accounting course. I did not listen to my dad. It cost me a fortune. He told me all in college to take one accounting class, and I resisted.
A third of the people love you, a third don't care about you, and a third hate you. So you concentrate on the third that love you, and you go for it.
I think the greatest Achilles heel for leaders is they don't give themselves time to think.
So my journey is one of those, like, there are a lot of detours. There's a lot of going off on the side roads.
Thrive Out listeners, you're in for a treat. We're here with Jamal Mashburn,
Jesse Itzler,
the John Maxwell,
Jackie the Joke Man Marling, New York Rangers great Mike Richter,
Lisa Lampanelli,
Mary Carrillo.
Oh, how nice.
I'm actually going through the practice of being an entrepreneur.
Pick yourself up, brush yourself off, and thrive loud.
Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
I love it.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. I'm your host, Lou Diamond, and today on Thrive Loud, we have a registered architect and acoustician and the co-founder of the Walters-Storyk Design Group, WSDG. He has provided design and construction supervision services for the professional audio and video recording community since 1969's design of Jimi Hendrix's Electric Lady Studios in New York City. Throughout his career, he has been responsible for over 3,500 world-class audio-video production facilities, including studios, radio stations, video suites, entertainment clubs, and theaters. His work has included private studio designs for artists like Whitney Houston, Bob Marley, Ace Frehley, Russ Freeman, the CC and Music Factory, I think even, Alicia Keys, Roc the Mic. It goes on and on and on. This is a man that has been following his passion and love across the globe for the craft he does each and every day, which is why he is on Thrive Loud today. Thrive Loud listeners, I bring you John Storyk. John, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
I am doing great. As I understand it, you're coming to me from not even the United States at this point. Is that true?
Well, in the winter, won't lie, we live in Mexico. My wife Beth and I live in Mexico in the cold months from in the Northeast. In the spring and summer, we live about 2 hours north of New York. So it's a little warmer where we are. I'm about 100 meters from the Caribbean. So.
The day that we're recording this, it's about 40 degrees here in the New York area and 50-mile-an-hour winds. You are winning, John.
Generally speaking, the weather is better for me than it is for you up there. But I'm coming to this area for a long time, since high school. And I've always returned here. And so this is basically our winter home.
Oh, that's great. So what I wanted to do today, as I gave in the opening here for our listeners, you have had a pretty storied career, pun intended. And I think it would be good for our listeners to understand a little bit of that journey from you to start. I will interject accordingly. And as I mentioned, you kind of accidentally got into this business. You want to share that component of the story, because what I love about this is you've followed your passions, you've went in the line of what you've studied, but you also have been a very successful entrepreneur along the way. And our listeners love journeys like that where people follow their passion. So I will hand the baton to you, and you can give our listeners a little story.
The story. So if it's a 1-minute response, then my response, I'm asked this quite often, is always wanted to be an architect since I was 11 or 12. Studied music since I was 6, all through high school. College, 64 to 68, Princeton, architecture student in rock bands, blues band. Graduate from Princeton, rock band, blues band, architecture job. And why not combine those two into recording studio design and then expand it into a global company that not only designs recording studios, but small theaters, conference rooms, radio stations, home theaters, et cetera, and 50 years later, we're on this show. So that sounds nice, and that all makes sense, and many parts of that story are true, but that's in fact not really what happened. Now for the story, which involves understanding the word serendipity. It's truly one of my favorite words. I know you're not going to ask me what's my favorite word, but if you were to ask me what my favorite word was, it would be serendipity. So the kid stuff is true, and the college stuff is true, and the band stuff is true, and the coming to New York City in June of 1968 is also true. I'm a suburban kid. I grew up in Long Island. And now comes one of those Forrest Gump feather moments.
Yeah.
Okay. And which is standing on line August 1968 because there was a delay at the ice cream parlor. Probably did inhale that evening. And so what do you do? Today, what you do is you pick up your cell phone and you just keep chatting and texting and doing whatever you do. But in 1968, that's, of course, not what you did. What you did was you grabbed the local East Village Other or Village Voice and you looked at the personal ads, or you just sort of started rummaging through the back of the magazine, of the newspaper, which is what I did. And my eye was caught by an ad that said, "Wanted carpenters to work for free on an experimental nightclub."
Huh.
Now, I said, okay, that sounds like that might be fun. I had a great job during the day. I was playing in my band at night. I actually thought I would pursue a music career. We were doing pretty well. But this ad looked intriguing. I kind of always enjoyed carpentry work. And so I answered the ad 30 minutes by putting a quarter, or maybe it was a dime, in a rotary machine, remember? Okay. So I'm that old. And then 30 minutes later, find myself on the Upper West Side of Manhattan meeting these two wild and crazy guys who have this idea to take over a loft in downtown Manhattan in an area barely known as Soho. Okay, I could have bought the building. That's what I should have done. And put this club in that people would arrive and they would change into gowns, and 64 people at a time would be kind of floating around in these separate areas, and there would be a sensorium of lights and colored slides, and there'd be a combination of theater and guides and music. It was sort of like a experiential kind of moment. Of course, right. This is 1968. And I said, well, this all sounds like fun. This sounds interesting. I said, I'll do it. I'll work at nights and build this for free if you let me redesign it. Okay. Which they did.
Okay, gotcha.
It opens in November. It's on the cover of Life magazine in February. And all of a sudden, we're famous. Wow. And if you come to Manhattan, this is where you went. This is one of the 3 or 4 things you did in Manhattan in the winter of 69, in the winter of 69.
68, right.
As this opened. So life changed for me on a dime. And one of the people that was there one night was Jimi Hendrix.
Right.
Now, Jimi Hendrix at the time was playing quite often at a blues club on 8th Street called The Generation. What makes this story even crazier is that that's exactly where I would go to 1 and 2 years earlier when I was at Princeton in order to see blues musicians.
Oh, very cool.
Because if you wanted to see real blues, you'd take the bus up to New York and you went to see James Cotton and Muddy Waters and Junior Wells and Buddy Guy, and maybe one night even a crazy left-handed guitar player from Seattle. Little did I know that a few years later, I'd be living in that basement. So Jimmy buys the club with his manager and somehow says, find the kid that did this crazy club downtown because I think I want that kind of look and feel in my club. And so all of a sudden, in January of 1969, I get a call from Jimi Hendrix's manager to design a club for Jimi Hendrix, which of course I said yes to, and I meet him and I do the design over the course of the next month. Now, understand that with the hindsight of history, this story is amazing. But as a 22-year-old kid in 1969, I just thought that this was exactly what's supposed to happen because it was 1969 and it was 1968. It never occurred to me that this was magical. It just occurred to me that this was normal. I now realize that this was anything but normal. So serendipity, you gotta remember that word.
I want to jump on. I just want to jump in for a sec, John. At this particular point, you've designed what is not a studio. It's a club, or is it a studio at this particular?
Well, we're going to get to that. I designed a club for Jimi. I actually have the drawings still in my possession 50 years later. And it's 50 years later because the date on the drawing is February 1969. So it's exactly 50 years right now as we speak. And at the 11th hour, his engineer producer, Eddie Kramer, then a budding young engineer, soon to become very famous, doing Led Zeppelin, Kiss, Hendrix, et cetera, talks Jimi out of doing the club. And the club always had an interesting component into it. In the back of the club was a room where we were going to record live, which I sort of didn't understand how to do that. But I said, well, that seems like a good idea. Now, you have to understand in 1968, 69, this was not particularly common and also very hard to do. But we figured, okay, we'll record the acts and we'll figure that out. That's nice. So Eddie wants to have nothing to do with the club. He just came over from London, talks Jimi out of the club, and talks him into making a full-blown personal recording studio, because Jimi is racking up $300,000 a year in studio bills. A lot of money then. So I watched my design go out the toilet at the 11th hour. I want to strangle Eddie. Footnote, Eddie has become a lifetime friend. He's my daughter's godfather. And I said, well, I guess that was fast. There goes my first client. I had only done, actually, my second client. And they said, no, you can stay on and do the studio for us. Okay. Which I did, in all honesty, remind everyone that I had actually never been in a studio. And so they said, well, do the best you can and read everything you can, and you're going to do a great job. I quit my job. I became an intern. I created my own internship for a acoustician who was doing radio stations. So I did all of his drafting in exchange for him.
Yeah, so you were doing that to learn about the sound studio and how you can incorporate that into your design.
I quit my day architecture job. It didn't seem like I needed to go there anymore since I already had a client. I was studying at a master's level at Columbia. I stopped doing that, and I poured all my energy into figuring out how to do this studio along with Eddie. And a year and 3 months later, it opened up, and it's never not performed. Some of it was luck, some of it was hard study. Before it was finished, I had 3 more studios to do. I mean, career tip, make your first project famous. And life changed on a dime. Within a year or two, I was doing studios for Todd Rundgren and Albert Grossman at Bearsville and Leon Russell. I woke up one day in Leon's house in Tulsa, and he was playing Beethoven on the piano at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I realized that my piano playing was just never going to be at that level, and I stopped my band. That was something I regret, to be honest. But I have more or less, with very little exception, never continued this path of architecture and acoustics. How to make architecture and acoustics.
So let's talk about this from architecture, specifically from a serendipity point of view. There's something serendipitous about the actual location as well, as I understand it, based on some of the architects that you have admired in your career. Is that true? A little bit of background?
You have done some homework.
I've done a little research.
Yes, you have. So the double, triple, quadruple serendipity moment here is, I already gave you the first one, which is that the site of the soon-to-be studio was in fact the Generation Club that I had already frequented.
Right.
Now comes the 2, 3, and 4. All through college, I had basically 3 favorite architects. I mean, everybody has their favorite architects. One of them, obviously, Frank Lloyd Wright. Another one was Antonio Gaudí, the Barcelonian architect.
Right.
And the third, which you have heard of, and the third one was one that you probably never did hear of, unless you, of course, done some research, which was an obscure Viennese architect by the name of Friedrich Kiesler. Friedrich Kiesler really only did a few buildings. He came over to the United States in the 1920s, and did this small movie theater for the Film Guild. He then basically doesn't really do anything else other than teach and sculpt. He did an exhibition studio for Peggy Guggenheim in the 40s. And at the end of his career in the 60s, does his seminal work, which is the Dead Sea Scrolls Museum in Israel, which maybe people have noticed and seen, and dies almost in obscurity. But I had been a fan of his. I had seen the Dead Sea Scrolls Museum, and I knew of the theater from the textbook, from pictures, but I never knew where it was. And of course, you're going to guess, that theater is the ground floor. The basement of that theater is the Generation Club. And so not only didn't I know that when I was going to visit Generation, I didn't even know it when Jimi hired me. It wasn't until we went to file the drawings at the building department, which I actually did myself, you wouldn't do that now, that the original drawings were rolled out for me by a plan examiner, And that's when I saw Frederick Kiesler's name. I almost screamed. Actually, I did scream in the building department because it had come full circle. I am now realized that for the last year, I'm drawing and then also ultimately working in the basement of that famous theater, which was still a theater. It had changed quite a bit. Easy enough to share with you the photos of it. So life is very strange that way, how these circles get completed. And to jump sort of to the, 48 years later, all the rest of this stuff about, well, how did you get from here to 50-person offices in 5 countries, global business? I know that's kind of a little bit of the focus of your discussions, is totally serendipitous and totally organic. I'm not a business major. I couldn't even read a balance sheet till I was 40. I mean, I really could not read a balance sheet. I never could understand why the 2 numbers were always the same. And my dad would scream at me. I mean, he was a businessman. In fact, I always liked to lecture. So lecturing led me to students. Students became interns. Interns became my partners. They opened up foreign offices. Let's just try it. And lo and behold, it grew completely organically. I'm not a business guy. I'm not really a manager guy. I'm more of a sax player, piano player, architect guy. And I've been very fortunate to meet really, really cool partners. And they now are my partners. They are my physical business partners and over the last 3 years. But all of this is serendipitous or organic. I believe the word is the same. Yeah.
So here's a good question, because in growing that business, and you're right, this is definitely the definition of word of mouth. Who's the guy that designed Jimi Hendrix studio? I want to deal with him. And then throughout all those years of you growing your business, that you had this name and this famous thing behind you. How much, though, when you would meet clients throughout the years, was their willingness to want to work with you, your expertise in the space, or maybe your own connectivity and personality and understanding what they needed in their specific studio?
I think up until the last 5 or 10 years, we really grew quite exponentially. But I think for certainly the first half, 2/3 of my career, there's a career before I met the W of WSDG. That's Beth Walters. That's my wife and partner. And then there's my career after. The career with the W is now bigger than the career without the W. But I think it's item C. I think I've always just been passionate about every job. People asking me all the time, what's your favorite studio? And my favorite, and I, by the way, still working. I mean, the reason why I was a little late today is I've been working since 6 o'clock this morning. I've been sketching, drawing, looking at stuff on Skype, sharing screens, etc. So my favorite studio is usually, my answer is always the same. It's the one I'm working on.
Got it.
What's your favorite project? It's the one I'm working on. And at any given time, we're in design on 3 or 4 projects. I mean, we have up to 50 or 60 projects at any one time, but they're in different stages. In the last 10 years, we've gone into some other activities, AV design, conference room design, straight architectural acoustics. By that I call isolation acoustics. And not every one of those subjects I'm touching personally anymore. My passion is still integrating architecture, which is real scale sculpture for people. That's what architecture is, solving problems for people. And acoustics. I love these 2 fields, and still to this day, as long as I can, I'm still looking at every design project that leaves our office. We have a half a dozen other really good designers now, but I'm still looking and either co-designing or checking. But I think it's really more item C. Now, having said that, it occurred to me a long time ago that at some moment in time, if you don't spread the word, they just won't read it. I mean, your podcast here, at a certain moment in time, if you want people to listen to it, you have to tell them about it. You have to get it somehow. Okay, so you could wait for the word to spread organically, or you could buy some Facebook time or take out an ad or do whatever you do to promote your own work. So having not studied marketing and also fundamentally a disbeliever in marketing. I mean, in a perfect world, I think people should just call us. And people do call us. Okay, that's what our marketing is basically defensive. But spreading the word is not. So I took a position many, many years ago, and it basically hasn't changed, which is that when we're done with projects, we should get them published. Let's just get them published, and let's make sure people see what they look like, what they feel like, and how they technically solve problems. So if you go to our website, I mean, our website is basically our library, and we use it more as a library, okay? You will see thousands and thousands of photos and articles that we have curated over the years. That's where we put our energy. The press has been, the professional press has been very, very kind to us, but on the other hand, we've been kind to them. We're the ones that actually do the sexy projects, provide the pictures, and solve problems, and then tell them about that. Having said that, we're in a new era now where people hit Google and you have to pay attention to SEO, and we're doing that. I mean, I have some people that do that, but quite frankly, even most of that is organically grown.
Right.
To be honest, we've let it grow organically.
Hey there! If you're enjoying how Lou is connecting with this guest in this interview, then just imagine how impactful he can be in person. As an international speaker and consultant, Lou Diamond is all about getting organizations to thrive through the power of connecting. To learn more about how you can hire Lou to speak at your company, your conference, or your next event, head on over to loudiamond.net and click the Book Lou button to learn more. He'll truly get everyone to thrive loud. All right, let's get back to the show.
John, here's the question I've always wanted to ask an architect who's worked in all these different spaces. Was there ever one challenge, not your favorite project, but maybe something that was a big challenge? And I'm asking this from the acoustic point of view. Maybe some challenge about the environment it was in, or what they wanted everything to look like, or an environment, something that stuck out that made it almost like a much more challenging project for you to capture what you were trying to deliver for your client.
That's a good question. And to be honest, almost every project has that.
Okay.
The other big concept, I'll kind of circle back to this business thing, because I know that that's what I think people who are dialing into your podcast. I have always also maintained that it's very important for us, by that I mean our company and me, to not become a commodity. We've had countless numbers of offers. I can't tell you how many times I've had people call me, well, can we just buy the drawings of the studio you did for Whitney Houston? And I could sell them. They're my drawings. When you get into a contract with somebody, you may sign an NDA, but the drawings are mine. The drawings are ours. We own the drawings, and the person who hired us has a one-time right to use them.
Right.
So yes, I could take Whitney's drawings and take her name off of it and repurpose them. And I've never done it. Never, ever have I done it. Do we use details from them? Yes. Do we use things we learn from them? Of course we do. It's our knowledge. So I've never wanted to become a commodity, because I think if you become a commodity, now you're competing against yourself. You're competing against the rest of the universe. I've always wanted to be the person. You go to those guys if you really have a problem and you really want to get it solved. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that almost every project that comes to us, it's sort of like a self-filtering prophecy. So we position ourselves that way. Now, that's worked against us sometimes, Lou, because sometimes the nature of how we present ourselves, people will just assume we're too expensive, which actually we're not really that expensive. We're priced sort of in the same universe as other designers. We're not DIY material. But what it does is it becomes a kind of a filter. So that the people who call us up, particularly in the last 10 or 15 years, because things have really gone into a new dynamic for us, very positive dynamic, extremely busy. We'll talk about studios and our industry.
Yeah.
Because there's a rumor that studios are over, which is, of course, completely false. Anything but the truth. But what happens is that the way we present ourselves becomes self-filtering. So we kind of don't get people calling us that want run-of-the-mill stuff. We get people calling us when their ceilings are too low, or they've got 130 pounds of stuff they want to put in a 100-pound bag, or they have a budget crunch, or they have a time crunch. So when the rock stars call, they usually have a time crunch. Usually don't have a money crunch. They have a time crunch. They got the money. They don't have enough time. Okay? So I could probably go and look at every project and point out, you know, a tricky issue. We've had some fun with locations. I mean, it was fun to do the largest studio in Southeast Asia in Kuala Lumpur, and it was fun to do the first studio in Iceland. Okay, and it's fun to work with people like Harry Connick or Springsteen or Whitney, and you know, these are interesting moments, and the artists push you to your limits. Sometimes more than you want to be pushed, but in general, they make you do better work because they are artists themselves. Okay, so I would think every project has a management issue, has a challenge issue.
Let's jump into what you were about to go to, because this is a great point. Technology, even you and I had spoke before we recorded. The price of microphones, the technology of even what we're using today has leaps and bounds over what's out there. Even the sound quality around different things, which would lead to a rumor, well, our studio is still needed. So as you were alluding to, talk about the change in the world of sound and music and recording, and what's going on today and why.
Well, the world changed when digital audio arrived. Okay, so you can thank a small research group in Germany for that. Anybody that was watching that happen, and I was watching it happen. I said, "Whoop! This is a game changer." There have been a few game changers in my life at a technical level. That was clearly one of them. There have been a few others that I think will be a little more difficult to discuss in this podcast. I don't think this is the place to discuss time delay spectrometry. My guess is that people will turn the dial off. Okay, but digital audio, I think everybody can relate to. So everything changed when that took place. And if you were watching it, you would soon realize that digital audio would have serious consequences on the pain and suffering, or the entry level into recording. It would also help to demolish the record companies as we know it, the record industry as we know it, cause it almost to go flat on its back. It would also cause other social phenomena to happen, like artists not getting paid properly, because believe it or not, the record companies, although they were more or less, a bunch of gangsters selling you stuff 3 and 4 times over, were actually out there making some real fortunes happen for the artists. I mean, they looked out for themselves, but they also looked out for the artists. Yeah. The minute digital arrived, everything shifted to those silicone guys. And they never cared. They didn't care as much about the artists as the record companies. Okay. The record companies were artist driven. Okay. So we saw that coming. Different people saw it coming at different times. And of course, when the wave finally hit the shore, what did it look like? Well, it looked like massive closing of recording studios. It looked like the record industry, just CD sales disappearing because you didn't need it anymore. It looked like every Tom, Dick, and Harry stealing 25,000 songs. I remember my son came in and said, "Hey, Pop, I got 25,000 songs. I just downloaded them for free."
Yep. The Napster years, right?
Napsters or whatever. And I looked at him. I mean, he was in junior high school, I think. And I said, "Well, that's kind of cool, but you do realize, Corbett, that that's not a sustainable model."
Right.
That's an interesting thing that you just did, but if that continues ad infinitum, there's not going to be any music to download.
Right.
Okay. So he, of course, had no idea what I was talking about, but that's okay. At least I did, and I got it out. Okay. So things have settled down, and that's another podcast, and you can find 5 other people to talk to that about. Okay. Including podcasting people, including you. For instance, the digital era has allowed you to be right here today.
Right.
Okay. You couldn't do this 20 years ago. There'd be no way. You wouldn't be able to afford the equipment. There wouldn't even be equipment. And so you're in the broadcasting business right now.
Yep.
This is it. You are a radio station, and unlicensed, no less. Thank goodness. Okay, but legal, totally legal, and providing an amazing service to people. You're having fun, and you're even making some money, and that's fine, and that's great. Okay, so let's focus down on studios. At the end of this sort of tsunami, when the dust settled and the water went back out, and people who crashed and burned actually crashed and burned, and people who didn't crash and burn like us kept surviving, and how we did is yet another interesting story. What's happened is that there's more studios than ever, okay? Because now we're into a sort of democratized moment of audio and content.
Yep.
Okay, if you replace the word audio with content, that means you're part of the record business. You are in the record business. It's just a different kind of record. You're not making music today, but you're making content that people will enjoy, okay? And so how are you doing it? You're doing it on $1,000 worth of equipment, if that, okay? So the threshold of entering the production and broadcasting universe that you're in is tiny. Yep. So it means anybody can do it. So what separates you from the next guy that can jump into it? Your content.
Right.
Okay? And same thing with studios. Studios are a little more complicated because audio is a little bit more complicated than the spoken word. But now all of a sudden, instead of the threshold of entry into studio construction, let's talk about studios, which is a world that I was in, used to be $1 million. I mean, when we built Electric Lady, you couldn't buy a console. You had to make the console. You had to order it as a custom object, one at a time. Now you can buy consoles for $3,000 that probably do more than that console did 50 years ago. So the threshold of entrance is down by, I think it's probably 2 decimal points.
Yeah.
So you tell me what happens when that happens. It's common sense. You're just going to have more studios. And plus the equipment got better.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody's equipment is terrific. The threshold of entrance is 1/10 or 100th of what it used to be. Okay, there's more content and more music being made than ever before. Now, not all of it is good, and you may not like all of it, and that's another podcast. Okay, but that doesn't mean we're not making it. Okay, so there's more opportunity. So thus, we have more studios. Now, not every studio needs what we do, but if the threshold was reduced by 1,000th, and there's 100 more studios than there used to be, and I only need to get 10 of them a year or 20 of them a year, okay? And you do the math, you figure it out. So the fact of the matter is we have more work than ever before, because the only thing that actually now distinguishes one studio from another, it turns out to be the architecture. So we have more studios than ever before. I think there's a universe of people that really have recognized that studios need to be architecturally amazing. They need to reflect the personality of their owners. What we don't have is one kind of studio being built in the same order of magnitude as they were in the 80s. The big, giant commercial studios that are rented out by the hour or the day, that's almost a thing of the past. Every city still has a few, i.e. Electric Lady. It's ironic that still one of the best, if not the best studio in the city. Actually, the 2 top studios in New York City are Electric Lady and Jungle.
Right.
We did both
of them.
So it's nice to have those kind of credentials. But the lion's share of our work, the bread and butter of our work, okay, are what you and I would call personal or project studios. Now, having said that, that does not necessarily mean that they're small.
Yeah.
I mean, we're doing some 7-figure personal studios because people have the money and they just want them. Okay. So extremely busy. While this was settling, while that industry was kind of getting itself juggled out and there were some crunchy times there. I mean, the recession in 8 was tough for everybody. I mean, it just hit everybody. We were very, very fortunate because we had diversified. We had offices in 5 other countries.
Right.
Okay, so we could drop our employees. We could offload some work when we had it. We also realized that we should enter other fields that we could use our expertise in, like AV design, home theater design, radio station design, architectural acoustic analysis, even some forensic work, testimony work, noise abatement work. This is not overwhelmingly interesting work, but it does pay the rent when aside. But right now we're swamped with studios. It's still my passion. It's still my passion.
So I love asking guests this question, John, and I'm curious to see where this goes. You've had a thriving career. You are literally, we're up at 6 o'clock this morning, still doing work. You love what you're doing. And most days you're rocking and rolling. On the days that you're having an off day, you're a little not in the regular flow. What practice do you seek, or what individual do you seek out to get yourself back on the thriving track?
Okay, so you're catching me. You know, it's funny. When I teach a lot. I teach a full course at Berkeley in April, and I lecture a lot. And I always tell people the real pay for me doing, because none of this pays very much, is the questions. I'm always looking for a question that I've never heard. Now, to be honest, most questions that I hear, I've heard them before. But every now and then, so I have to admit that is the first time anyone has ever even asked anything close to that question. I'm genuinely impressed. Kudos to you. So, well, I'll be honest. I mean, life changed for me when I met Beth. I was passionate and wild and crazy and had my own demons, and everything changed with Beth, who brought sanity and stability into my life. She's the woman I should have met. Would have saved me a few divorces. Money. You can ask Herb about that. I don't know if you're going to edit that out or not.
We'll share that in there. We'll share that in.
Yeah, it took me a while to find the right person and for the right person to find me. So when those moments happen, she usually sees them. And luckily for me, she'll sort of grab me up, feed me the great meal. I mean, we've pretty much grow our own food in the summer, and I don't know anything about growing food. And we try to eat well. I have a few passions. I love baseball. I still play softball. Mm-hmm. I'm the oldest guy in my town softball league by at least 4 years. I mean, I'm a catcher, so I know everybody in the league when they come up to plate. Nobody starts playing softball at 72. So I play every Monday and Wednesday.
Oh, wow.
On Sunday, still to this day. I'm a pretty avid scuba diver. So, for instance, every day in Mexico, I scuba dive. I go on scuba diving trips twice a year. So I try to stay active. I'm in pretty good health. I love reading.
Great.
Mostly nonfiction, biography, and technology. So I stay active that way. And I love music. Music is on pretty much 24/7 in the office. My favorite music, believe it or not, is Italian opera.
I was going to go there. I was going to say for that, what is your favorite thing to hear?
Yeah, Italian opera.
Okay.
Mostly Pucci. I've seen La Boheme 20 times, if I've seen it once. I just got to see Turandot in the Sydney Opera House last week, which I thought I was in heaven. And then right behind that, R&B, which was my band in college. So, you put all these things together in a blender, and I don't know, I'm still sane at 72. We'll see. I mean, more is behind me than in front of me. I'm wrestling with that, but I still enjoy what I'm doing. And luckily, what I like doing doesn't require me to be working 10 hours a day lifting concrete. So my career path is a path that, allows me to do this work late into my life, whereas other people. So I've never really thought that I was working. When I get up every day, I don't really think I'm working. There's no difference between what I was doing at 9:30, which was an office meeting, and this conversation. To me, it's just all part of what I'm doing today. One is just as enjoyable as the other. It's problem solving. It's having a discussion with somebody.
Right.
It's exploring. Even in this podcasting session, you have forced me to explore some. For instance, you forced me to answer this question. Okay, so that's cool. That's a new thing for me today.
And John, this is important. This is what Thrive Loud has always been about, is that we've been trying to decode what makes people thrive, and understanding what's behind it has always been key.
The answer is simple. Yeah. Just make sure that what you're doing for work doesn't look like work. It's that stupid. I mean, if you're working, by that I mean earning a living, but you don't think it's work, you hit it, and then get a good partner. I mean, that was my dad's suggestion to me. And by the way, if you think you're going to go into business, I should have taken the accounting course. I did not listen to my dad. It cost me a fortune. They told me all in college to take one accounting class, and I resisted. By the way, my sons did not make that mistake, and they both have their own businesses at 32 and 28, and they're both doing well.
This is great stuff.
They did take an accounting class. But just make work your passion, and then it doesn't seem like you're working. And also be honest, just always, like, we never not finish. At WSDG, our company, that's our letters. I tell everybody, I said, we got to do our best, and we never don't finish. I don't care. Even if we see that we're going to lose money, we're going to finish the job.
I'll put all the plugs and stuff for the websites, and all the links, and all the show notes will be there so people can learn about you and go to the website as well. I want to wrap with two last questions here. One will go with our standard Thrive Live question, which I said you knew the answer to. What is your all-time favorite movie?
Okay, disclosure, you told me you were going to ask, but I didn't have to think very much about it. I love the movies. I love Netflix. I love watching all that stuff. So I love movies and I love sports. But if I had to choose one that I could watch once a week, I think it's going to have to be A Wonderful Life with the Jimmy Stewart.
It's phenomenal. Hello, Building and Loan always gets me teared up and crying.
The building and loan company, and they lose the money, and then they find the money, and of course the doorknob, the little knob on the stair.
Right.
So every house has one of those. I think my house has two of them. Okay, but every house has one of those little knobs that keeps coming off that you want to strangle. But if you don't have that knob, you don't have a home. You just have a house.
That's a great line.
I don't know if I gave you more information than you wanted, but.
No, that's beautiful. And I love it. My last question, which was, and be honest, because like you have met and done the studios for so many unbelievable, impressive people. Has there ever been one that when you met and encountered that particular artist, there was a little bit of, you had a little star, a little bit of, oh my goodness, I get an opportunity to meet with this person? Is there one that stands out that was like, whoa, I have a meeting with such and such?
There's a few. I don't think there's one, but there's a few. Look, it starts with Jimi. I'm not a guitar player. When I got a call from Leon Russell, because I'm a piano player.
Right.
And I was a Leon Russell fan. And when I heard him playing Beethoven at 6 a.m. after being up all night in his house, my mouth just was open, and I said, I can't play like that. I'm never going to be able to play like that. I mean, this is Leon Russell playing Beethoven in his pajamas. And I quit my band, so I don't know if I have to thank Leon for that. I've never been starstruck. I mean, maybe because at 22, my first client was a star, so the starstruck thing has never happened. I thoroughly enjoyed a 30-minute conversation with Bruce Springsteen once.
That's pretty cool.
We were in a meeting about his studio, and he was in the meeting. It was a standing meeting, by the way. We all stood for about an hour, and he didn't say a word. He just stood there. His wife did most of the organizing, Patty.
Yep.
And there were other people in the meeting, and that's about all I'm going to talk about. And then all of a sudden, the meeting ended. And people went in different directions. And I don't know, for some reason, he just continued. Next thing I know, it was just me and him standing there. And I turned to him. I said, I saw you talking about, I was in Las Vegas 2 weeks ago, and it was 2 a.m, and I was surf dialing. And there was a promo for the Buddy Holly something or other that you were pitching and whatever, I don't know. And I was quite impressed. And of course, we all love Buddy Holly. And no, it wasn't Buddy Holly. It was, not Buddy Holly. It was Roy Orbison.
Okay.
Who, of course, Bruce is a huge Roy Orbison fan.
Right.
When Roy got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it was Bruce that dedicated.
Right.
So, and all of a sudden, for the next 30 minutes, he didn't stop talking. So what it showed, he says, we were talking about business and architecture and where should things go and the color of this and that. And he was just watching and saying anything. But the minute we were talking about Roy Orbison, boom.
You just opened up.
And I have to admit that meeting and working with Harry Connick has been nothing but a pleasure. He's become a little bit of a friend. I don't see him that often, but we text sometimes, and he even promised to give me piano lessons, which I haven't taken him up on yet. I'm practicing in order to get ready for the lesson. He's a brilliant musician. I had no idea how talented he was. Of course, I've been a fan for years, and and very personable and smart. But there have been other guys we work with. We're doing something with J. Cole now, who's fantastic. Just could be the nicest, another one of those nicest guys in the world. People who have changed my life, there have been a lot of them. Eddie Kramer changed my life. Albert Grossman, the famous rock impresario and manager, was a mentor for 10 years. I lived on his estate when I came back from Colorado in the 70s. Really changed my life quite a bit. So I've been really, really lucky. I think that's kind of why I like teaching, because what are you really teaching? You're teaching. I'm teaching the material, but what you're really teaching is passion. And I don't know, it's hard to teach. Some people have it. Some people almost have it. All I can do is share it. Okay. It's like what I said before. You just got to make your work you love, and then you're not working.
John Storyk, this has been great. Thanks again for taking time.
I don't know if this was going where you want it to go, but
as we love to say, if you're able to share something that our listeners can appreciate, then everybody's winning. And that's what the show's all about. So thank you so much, though. This has been great having you on.
Well, tell your listeners to visit our website. And I'm an email guy. If somebody wants to send me an email, I'm going to get it. I enjoy meeting new people and enjoy people who ask cool questions and stuff. It doesn't bother me.
It's great stuff. Thanks again, John, for coming on the show.
Okay, man. Thanks. See you.
And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us. And until next time, keep thriving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. And follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Thrive Loud. Or find us on the web at thriveloud.com.